Last episode, we exposed how American corporations profited from Nazi genocide. How 93% of Americans wanted nothing to do with the war until Pearl Harbor. And how Churchill let 3 million Indians starve while giving heroic speeches. Now let's talk about the real language of war. Money. Because at the end of the day, wars aren't fought on ideology alone, they're funded by cash. And World War II was the most expensive disaster in human history. Let's talk about money. Because at the end of the day, wars aren't fought on ideology alone, they're funded by cold, hard cash. And World War II was the most expensive human disaster in history. We're about to follow the money trail. And spoiler alert, it leads to some extremely uncomfortable places where profit motive meets mass death. Here is the number that should make you physically ill. The combined spending of all countries on World War II was over $1 trillion. Now, your brain probably can't process what $1 trillion actually means. So let me translate it into 2025 money. That's $17.9 trillion. $17.9 trillion. That's enough money to give every single person currently alive on Earth about $2,000 and still have change left over. That's enough to solve world hunger multiple times over, end homelessness in every developed nation, and probably fund a mission to Mars just for fun. And what did humanity get for this investment? A continent in ruins, cities reduced to rubble, 75 million fresh corpses, and generational trauma that we're still dealing with 80 years later. That's what we in the business world call a catastrophically bad return on investment. It's the worst trade deal in the history of trade deals maybe ever, and I say that knowing full well it sounds like a certain orange businessman, which is fitting because bad decisions made by egomaniacs are kind of the theme here. Let's break down this global spending spree by country, starting with the United States. Because nothing says arsenal of democracy. Quite like turning your entire economy into a death manufacturing machine and making a killing literally and figuratively. The United States spent $341 billion on World War II. In 2025 money, that's $5.86 trillion. $5.86 trillion. The US government essentially looked at the Great Depression, the worst economic crises in modern history, and said, you know what would fix this? Building things that explode and kill people. And it worked. Unemployment dropped from 17% to 1%. Factory production skyrocketed. Wages increased. The economy boomed. War, it turns out, is the ultimate Keynesian stimulus package. American factories became Santa's workshop. If Santa was a psychopath who specialized in mechanized death, they produced 300,000 aircraft. That's enough planes to give one to every person currently. Living in Iceland with thousands left over, they manufactured 41.4 billion rounds of small arms ammunition. To put that in perspective, that's enough bullets to shoot every human being alive at the time more than 10 times. Who needs 10 bullets per person? Apparently, America did, and they made sure to have them ready. 650,000 Jeeps at $738.74 each. That's roughly $16,234 in 2025 money per Jeep, cheaper than most used cars today. They were churning out military vehicles like a fast food chain pumps out burgers. The production line never stopped. The money never stopped flowing. And the shareholders, they got very, very rich. But here is where your patriotic feelings should get complicated. While American kids were dying on beaches in Normandy and islands in the Pacific, American corporations were making money hand over fist by selling to both sides. Corporate profits during World War II were obscene. The aircraft industry saw profit margins increase by over 400% in some cases. Steel companies made record earnings. Shipbuilders couldn't spend money fast enough. Even food companies got in on the action. Hershey produced over 3 billion chocolate ration bars for the military, creating a brand loyalty that persists to this day. That's not just supporting the war effort, that's building a customer base while people die. Now let's look at the Soviet Union, because their economic situation was somehow even more grimly hilarious. The USSR spent $192 billion on the war. That's roughly $344 billion in 2025 money by official Soviet accounting. But here is the thing about Soviet economic statistics. They were about as reliable as a conspiracy theory from your uncle's Facebook page. The Soviet economy was already a mess before the war. Stalin's forced collectivization of agriculture had caused famines that killed millions. His 5-year plans were more aspirational fiction than actual economic policy. Industrial production was impressive in some areas. They could make tanks and guns, but consumer goods were basically non-existent, and agricultural productivity was a joke. The Soviet Union was a military superpower built on an economic foundation of sand, propaganda, and sheer force of will. Then the war started, and things got worse. The Nazis occupied the most industrially productive regions of the Soviet Union: Ukraine, Belarus, parts of Russia. Factories were dismantled and moved east, beyond the Ural Mountains. A logistical nightmare that somehow worked because the alternative was letting the Germans capture them. Workers labored in conditions that would make modern safety inspectors have nervous breakdowns. People starved. Cities were leveled. And through it all, the Soviet economy kept producing weapons because the alternative was extinction. But, and this is the part Soviet historians really hate admitting, they couldn't have done it without American help. Through the Lease program, the United States sent the Soviet Union $10.8 billion worth of equipment and supplies. That's $194 billion in 2025 money. $194 billion of capitalist aid to save communism from fascism. The irony is so heavy, it could crush a panzer division. What did that money buy? Over 400,000 jeeps and trucks, the backbone of Soviet logistics. 14,000 aircraft. 13,000 tanks. Millions of tons of food, because the Soviet agricultural system was so dysfunctional that their soldiers were starving. Enough raw material: steel, aluminum, copper to keep Soviet factories running. Entire factories shipped as kits that could be assembled in the USSR. And yes, Spam. Mountains of Spam. American canned meat became a delicacy on the Eastern Front, because compared to whatever nightmare concoction the Red Army called food, Spam was gourmet. Now let's talk about the Nazis, because their war economy was the original pyramid scheme, and I mean that literally. Germany spent $270 billion on World War II. That's $4.85 trillion in 2025 money. $4.85 trillion on a war they started because their economy couldn't function without constant expansion and theft. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the GDP of Germany, France, and the United Kingdom combined in 2025. They burned through an entire continent's worth of wealth in 6 years. How did they finance this? Well, for starters, they looted everyone. The Nazis stole gold reserves from every country they occupied. They seized industrial equipment and shipped it back to Germany. They confiscated art on an industrial scale. Gring alone accumulated over 1,500 paintings, most stolen from Jewish families and museums across Europe. It was the biggest art heist in history, except instead of clever criminals, it was just Nazis with paperwork and guns, which is somehow less impressive and more evil. Food was extracted from occupied territories, causing mass starvation. The Hunger Plan, an actual policy document, called for 30 million Soviet citizens to starve to death so their food could be redirected to Germany. 30 million deliberate starvation deaths for economic reasons. They wrote this down, they planned it, they started implementing it. And people wonder why we shouldn't be civil to Nazis. Slave labor was another pillar of the Nazi economy. By the end of the war, roughly 12 million people, about a quarter of the German workforce, were forced laborers, concentration camp prisoners. And civilians kidnapped from occupied countries, worked in factories, mines, and farms. They were worked to death, literally. When they died, they were replaced. It was industrial murder marketed as economic efficiency. And the companies using this slave labor, many of them still exist. IG Farben, the chemical conglomerate that produced Zyklon B for the gas chambers and used slave labor in its factories, was broken up after the war into companies that include modern pharmaceutical giants. Krupp, the industrial manufacturer, used tens of thousands of slave laborers and remains a major German company today. These corporations made fortunes from slavery and genocide, and after the war, they paid some fines, rebranded, and kept going. Let's zoom out and look at the other major players. The United Kingdom spent $120 billion on the war, 2.15 trillion in 2025 money. This bankrupted the British Empire. Britain started the war as a global superpower and ended it as a debtor nation dependent on American loans. The empire began collapsing almost immediately after the war. All that money, all that effort to preserve the British Empire, and they lost it anyway. It's like maxing out your credit cards to save a sinking ship, and the ship sinks anyway, and now you're broke and wet. France spent $15 billion. $269.2 billion in 2025 money, much of which was spent in 6 weeks of getting absolutely demolished by the German invasion, followed by occupation costs and reconstruction. They paid for the privilege of being conquered and occupied. It's like paying your kidnappers' expenses. The total cost, $17.9 trillion in 2025 money, represents the single largest mobilization of resources for a single purpose in human history, and that purpose was killing each other as efficiently as possible. Imagine if humanity had put that same effort, that same innovative spirit, that same industrial capacity toward, I don't know, curing diseases, building infrastructure, exploring space, or literally anything that didn't involve mass murder. But with Divin, we built bombs and tanks and planes designed specifically to kill other humans, and we did it with such efficiency that we revolutionized manufacturing, logistics, and industrial production in the process. The same assembly line techniques that Ford developed to make cars cheaper were applied to building bombers. The same logistics systems that delivered packages were used to deliver ammunition. The same organizational principles that ran businesses were deployed to run armies. War became industrialized, systematized, optimized. And the people who profited from this optimization, they kept their money. The defense contractors, the steel companies, the oil companies, the transportation companies. They made fortunes building the machinery of death. And after the war, they kept those fortunes and used them to build even bigger corporations. The military-industrial complex was born during World War II. The cozy relationship between government, military, and private defense contractors that President Eisenhower warned about in his farewell address. That started here. Companies realized that war is profitable. Politicians realized that defense spending creates jobs. The military realized that bigger budgets mean more toys, and thus, a self-reinforcing cycle was born that persists to this day. In 2025, the United States defense budget is over $900 billion. $900 billion. That's more than the next 10 countries combined spend on their militaries. The same companies that built tanks in the 1940s, Lockheed, Boeing, Raytheon, are now building drones, cyber weapons, AI-driven targeting systems, and satellites. The profits are astronomical. Defense contractors' stock prices soar during conflicts, and the revolving door between the Pentagon, Congress, and defense contractors spins so fast it could generate electricity. The economics of World War II taught us a terrible lesson. War is good for business, not good for humanity, not good for the people who die, but very, very good for the people who sell the weapons, the fuel, the food, the clothing, the vehicles, the communications equipment, and everything else an army needs. And once that lesson was learned, it was never forgotten. So we've followed the money, and it leads exactly where you'd expect. To the pockets of people who profited from death while contributing nothing to the actual fighting. But the economics are just one layer of the absurdity, because beyond the dollars and cents, beyond the profit margins and production numbers, World War II was also the most surreal, bizarre, and darkly hilarious conflict in human history. That's part 7, The Absurdity of War, where we expose Nazi space weapon plans, Japanese balloon bombs, the cigarette-powered war effort, and statistical insanity. That sounds too stupid to be true, but absolutely is. From the daily life of soldiers to the weapons that never should have existed, it's time to examine the sheer absurdity of trying to organize mass murder at industrial scale. Click part 7 right now, it's live. And it's going to make you laugh and cry simultaneously, or check the full playlist. Subscribe to Midnight Meme Historian because we've got 2 more episodes left, including the modern parallels that should absolutely terrify you. Comment below. Is war profiteering just smart business? Or should defense contractors face limits on profit margins during conflicts? Let's debate capitalism and morality. Support more episodes at ko-fi.com/midnightmemehistorian. Every coffee equals one more corporation getting exposed. Part 7. The Absurdity Machine. Watch it now.